Why is it that even with the belief and intentional efforts we make in sales to build buyer champions who will sell for us, do we still fall short, regardless of what we try to do? Well, let me ask you this. If you were to give advice to a single friend for how to find a mate, how to fall in love, what would you say? Would you tell your friend the specific things that you did, the steps you took, the effort you made, the things you said? Well, that's not where I would tell my friend to start. And that's not where I'm going to tell you to start in your journey to build a champion, to find that career-changing professional relationship that will support you, advocate you, and sometimes even sacrifice for you. It's actually less about what you do and more about what you know about this person, about people really. And there's one piece of awareness that you need to know about buyers for how they would become your champion. And I'm about to share it with you.
Normal is overrated.
Obviously, there's a lot of sellers in our community who aren't even aware of or prioritizing the mission of building champions. But for the many who are, the majority are more focused on what they're doing, for what in their mind is a process or a message or some return on investment calculation that will lead to a human being and one of executive power and credibility, no less, to respond to that message or process or ROI and say to themselves, yeah, I think I'll be their champion. Based on what I just heard, I'm fully ready to put my reputation on the line and start to get these knuckleheads around me to get on the right bus. Well, the reason that so many of these things we do fail in trying to build champions isn't because there's anything wrong with those things that we're doing. It's because we're not doing the right things that our buyer needs from us at the right time in their mental journey. And so what I'm going to do for you is completely reframe your starting point for how and why you choose to do anything toward the goal of building a buyer champion. Now, I know we're talking about people, human beings who all have different personalities, beliefs, moods, and motivations. In fact, if you've watched my video on the 3 traits of elite sellers, up above here, you've heard me talk about the importance of buyer empathy and having real intuition for the people we sell to. Because what I'm about to share with you actually applies to any person in any situation from any walk of life. And this reframe starts with your awareness that when a buyer chooses to become your champion, they all do so by going through the same mental journey as they would for any product or any service, regardless of the sales or buying process. Those things just affect the frequency, just how much energy, speed, and emotion is involved in what are always the same mental needs. And when you can start your selling journey with this intuitive alignment to their buying journey, sales will get so much easier. You'll start selling with a level of instincts and strategy that'll improve your conversion rates and win rates immediately. And this awareness I want you to have for how a buyer becomes your champion starts with understanding these simple but true 4 champion milestones. You see, every human buyer you're going to face, while they're certainly all going to have different biases and beliefs, they will always go through this same mental journey we call their champion milestones. Now, these probably won't always follow the same linear path, especially with the different ways that modern buyers consume and evaluate purchases today. And they'll most often be subconscious reactions to a decision process. But the more aware you are that your buyer will always need to satisfy these 4 mental milestones, the more clear and confident you'll be in making the right decisions for your sales strategies. And the first of the 4 champion milestones is what we call connection. And this is so critical, so listen. Most of us, when we think about building champions, we ask ourselves, how can I get this buyer committed to me? Now, we're going to come back to commitment, but all sellers need to understand this. No buyer ever reaches a state of commitment to something unless they first become connected to it. Again, think about your sales process through the lens and mindset of a buyer. To become committed to something or someone, that's more of an intellectual decision. That takes on far more weight and risk and potential consequence that makes that commitment a bigger decision than we sellers often think. But just put yourself in the buyer's shoes. If it was you who had to make this decision, one that might impact you personally, the company, or your customers, for you to put yourself on the line to make this public commitment to a new solution, what prerequisite questions would you need answered? I'll tell you what the very first question would be. What does this have to do with me? In fact, answering that question is where the connection milestone starts. The buyer's subconscious goes something like this. I'm 20 minutes into this meeting. What about this product connects to the problems that I'm trying to solve and outcomes that I need to achieve? And once I understand just what it does, just what about this solution is going to enable those outcomes that I want? So think of this connection milestone as a mental password, a prerequisite gate for a buyer mind to even begin considering any level of commitment, which by now you've probably already assumed that the second champion milestone is commitment. And while connection is predominantly emotional with some very necessary intellectual connection, commitment is purely rational. There's nothing abstract about putting your name, your political capital on the line to publicly represent and advocate for a decision. Remember, the primary definition of a champion is someone who is actively selling on our behalf. They're walking the halls, picking up phones, debating with people on video as to why we're the best choice. And so if you've ever found yourself at the end of a deal throwing pilots, discounts, and currencies at a buyer, hoping that one of these things will stick and motivate your buyer to become your champion, well, more times than not, if that person hasn't met their commitment milestone, this state where all of their commitment gaps and concerns would have been eliminated, then chances are that even though those things you did seem to be logical choices, most often, even a buyer who was initially connected to your value proposition just never got committed. The commitment milestone is actually the state when a buyer chooses to become your champion. But I thought you said there was 4 milestones, Rivera. That's only 2. So I'm gonna ask you a really painful question. Have you ever had a champion in a deal, and I mean they met the criteria and were totally willing to sell on your behalf, but they just didn't take enough action for you and you either lost it or the deal just vanished?
Quick pause. Now, if you're getting value, please hit subscribe, tap like, and drop a comment so more people can find this and I can help more people. Now let's get back to it.
What I've learned, both in working thousands of deals of all sizes and studying the science of human motivation, is that there is one emotion that holds far more priority in business than any other, and that's the emotion of trust. This third champion milestone, and what is always the explanation for why a champion wouldn't fully take action, all in, pushing for our solution, is that they hadn't met their all-important trust milestone. Write this down. Every deal begins and ends with trust. No buyer walks into a deal fully trusting a new solution, and it's not because they don't understand it. It's just because they haven't experienced it yet. But even in those deals when we've eventually gotten commitment from a buyer, if they, as a person, still have trust gaps that haven't been met yet, then they're just not going to take the level of actions that we want them to. Remember, commitment is intellectual, and I'm telling you that trust is predominantly emotional. How many times have you trusted something or someone, even though you didn't have all the logical facts in order? There were still unanswered questions, but you followed your gut and your instincts and you chose to trust. Or conversely, when everything looked good on paper and maybe you even gave your own verbal commitment, but a lack of trust came over you and you decided to pass. And again, while they often do, these mental milestones or reaching one of these 4 mental states doesn't have to happen sequentially. There's no science behind that. But when you as a seller have no doubt that your buyer is eventually going to need their own personal trust criteria met, then wouldn't you intentionally try to understand what that buyer's trust standard is and then build strategies around meeting it? Because if you've ever had a champion in a deal and still got surprised that there was an issue or concern that slowed everything down, you know what it feels like to have missed on a champion's trust milestone. And here's where we have to be careful in sales. Not only are we sellers rarely proactive in addressing the risks and concerns that come with what we sell, that's often the opposite of what we're being told to do. How many times have you been instructed to avoid technical validation events, forego the workshops, keep services away, refuse reference calls, just offer them a discount? Well, if I gave you a $5 solution that was a piece of trash that would ruin your reputation and hurt the company, or an opportunity to spend $5,000 on something that you fully trusted would meet the credibility and competency needs of the business, which one would you choose? Every deal will begin and end with trust, no matter what you hope and wish will happen. Regardless of the frequency or size of the decision, in order to fully embrace taking real substantive action on your behalf with everyone in the buying consensus, every champion will need to meet their personal trust milestone. But there's one final champion milestone that elite sellers never forget. And this is what I call the winning milestone. Again, challenge yourself to see this entire buying journey through the lens and experiences of your buyer. The reason I call this the winning milestone is that internally, as the champion negotiates the final and more formal stages of the purchase, because they're your champion, they're going to consider closing this agreement a win for them. Yes, they'll know that it's a win for you as well, and they'll probably want that, but make no mistake, understand two things about the winning milestone. Number one, if they've been truly acting like a champion for you internally with their colleagues and leadership, that means that they've put something on the line. Maybe it's serious political capital, or perhaps just some level of credibility. So your champion will view closing this deal, considering all of the consensus, the processes, and the protocols, a personal win for them. These aren't the 4 salesperson milestones. Remember, this is all about your intuition for the mental journey that the buyer goes through and how to affect that. Because number 2, when we sellers can realize the total scope of work and internal obstacles that our champion will need to overcome, we can then naturally work to empower those champions through it all. We take work off their plate at every opportunity we can find. And what happens when we respect and respond to the winning milestone is that we avoid getting outsold, either by our competition or other internal champions of alternative solutions. If we sellers want to consistently build champions with more efficiency, intuition, and success, it all starts with knowing the mental journey that a buyer will need to go through in order to become and win as our champion. And those 4 champion milestones are connection, commitment, trust, and winning. If there's other enterprise sales topics you want to hear about, share in the comments below, and I'd like you to answer this question. Having a true empathy mindset and thinking like a buyer, what do you think is the hardest part of being a buyer in this modern era? Friends, if I'm helping you in any way, be sure to bump that like, subscribe, and then click on the screen right now to watch another video helping you to master the human sell and elite level sales strategy. Thanks for watching.